Hello friends, today we are going to discuss about non-aligned movement. This is very important for UPSC perspective as well as ignou perspective. So let us begin. Okay, the non-aligned movement. Non-aligned movement. Before discussing the non-aligned movement, we need to understand the situation in the of the world after Second World War. After Second World War, the world was divided into two blocks. Okay, one block is led by US and another block is led by USSR. Now US, the block which was led by US, it advocated liberal, democratic, capitalist system, whereas USSR has advocated a communist system. USSR and its allies, US and its allies made the world into two warring blocks. So this is very essential to understand. So many of the countries were allied to either of these countries, US or USSR. So at this point of time only, some of the countries were non-allied to either of these countries. That is, not allied to either of these countries, either US or USSR. So we are going to discuss movement about that particular countries. So let us begin the discussion. Okay. Now we have given a just brief introduction about it. So let's get into the context and imperatives of non-aligned movement. So what was the context of non-aligned movement? There were two, that is Afro-Asian resurgence and bipolar world politics. Now bipolar world politics we have discussed, isn't it, about the rivalry between US and the USSR. Now let me coming to Afro-Asian resurgence. Now after the Second World War, many of African and Asian countries become independent. So they wanted an independent international policies to be followed. And they don't want it to be either part of US or USSR because they were in apprehension that their autonomy, their international autonomy would be gone or would be deprived because of these two powers. So they non-aligned from these countries. So this was a context of the formation of non-aligned movement. So what were the imperatives or the inspirations which resulted in the formation of non-aligned movement is, one is economic development. Economic development. Okay, economic development. That a country, these countries which I have called Afro-Asian countries, wanted economic development. For that economic development, they needed economic assistance. Okay, and if they are remaining non-aligned to either of the countries, they will be friend to all countries, isn't it? So they can avail economic assistance from all countries and they can increase trade. So this is one logical idea. Okay, now non-aligned movement is that when second imperative is that regional peace, that is peace without development without peace is really impossible. So real development cannot occur without peace. So ensuring regional peace is one thing, and third is ensuring world peace or avoiding global threats. So that is one other thing. Okay, avoiding global threat perceptions. And fourth is some domestic imperatives were also there, such as take the case example of India in general. India is a pluralistic country, so it had plural political ideology. So it had a communist leading groups were there, then liberal leading groups were there, capitalist leading groups are there. So what happened is that in order to, so if India had gone through USSR section, it would have a peace, one section in the country, and a displeasure in another section in the country. So in order to remain neutral to them, neutral to these domestic players, what happened is that India had been a proponent of the non-aligned movement. So fourth imperative is domestic imperatives. First is economic development, second is regional peace, third is world peace, fourth is what? Domestic imperatives. So let's let's go to the concept of non-alignment movement. Non-alignment movement. So some of the Western scholars say that non-alignment is related with the isolationism, non-commitment, neutrality, neutralism, and non-involvement. But non-alignment and neutrality has some differences that we need to note it down. Non-alignment and neutrality has some alignment, because neutrality is a legal concept. It is present in the law. Okay. For example, is that a state must be what? Neutral. A state must be neutral to religion, to different political parties, etc. Okay. But non-alignment is not mentioned in the law. So what happens is that it is up to the state to do so. If it produces a great result, it can non-align with different countries. Okay. For example, is that India had been non-aligned with Israel since 1990s. They were not having a till 1990s, India had not a public relation with Israel. But later in 1990s, it recognized what relation with Israel. It aligned with Israel. But before that, it had performed a non-alliance with Israel. So we need to understand one concept is that non-alliance is not negative. Non-alliance is positive in this sense. Non-alliance is positive. How non-alliance is a positive concept? Because it will help countries to play an active role in world affairs. That it could have an independent stand of its own. So it can play an active role in world affairs. And it could have friendship and cooperation with all countries. Okay. So these are the two positive concepts of being in non-aligned movement. So let's go to the evolution of non-aligned movement. So the evolution of non-aligned movement is very, very important, and it was possible due to three leaders: Jawaharlal Nehru from India, Gamal Abdel Nasser from Egypt, Joseph Broz from Yugoslavia. Now, from these leaders, these were named Jawaharlal Nehru, Gamal Abdel Nasser, and Tito. Among these, we need to have a special mention about our first Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. So Nehru had used the was apprehension of the term neo-imperialism, that is new imperialism. Now, most of the colonies were subjected to imperialism. Okay. So were victims of the imperialism, most of the colonies. So what happens is that under the bipolar world, these new independent countries should not. Nehru had a vision that this new country, independent countries, especially including India, should not face a neo-imperialism, should not be subjected to neo-imperialism. It should have an independent stand of its own. So that's why what happens is that Nehru was one of the forerunner of this non-aligned movement. So what happens is that he started to establish a Asian Front from 1940s itself. Asian Front from 1940s itself. As a part of it, what happened is that Asian Relations Conference, he convened a conference called Asian Relations Conference in New Delhi. Okay, but in 1950s we saw some of the African countries also becoming independent from colonizers. So what happened is that he wanted to include African countries also along with the Asian countries. So what happens is that in April 1955, Nehru, together with the leaders of Indonesia, Burma, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan, convened an Afro-Asian conference at Bandung, at Indonesia. This is called Bandung Conference. But this Bandung Conference was a failure. Why it was a failure? Because most of the country were allied to either of the foreign powers. So this had a problem. Okay. Now they were not ready to take an international policy under anti-imperialism. Okay. So these were the problems. Okay, main problems. But what happens is that the efforts were continued. They didn't halted the effort to form a non-aligned movement, because many of the countries were wanting to have a non-aligned movement, something like that, and they don't want to join either of the blocks. Okay, so what happened is that in Yugoslavia at Brioni, Tito along with Nehru and Nasser, had decided to build an unspoken alliance, okay, which is and as a result of it, the first non-aligned conference was held at Belgrade in Yugoslavia. Non-aligned conference was held at Yugoslavia. Now, to be a member of this non-aligned conference or non-aligned movement, there are certain conditions. So, just investigate. We need to investigate such conditions. That is, one is the country need to have independent foreign policies, and it should not do its independent foreign policy according to the whims and fancies of either of US or USSR. Then opposition to colonialism in all its form and manifestation, and should not be member of any military blocs, either US or USSR, and should not conduct any bilateral treaty with superpowers, and should not provide military base to any of the superpower. So these were the conditions. The first summit was held at Belgrade. Then some of the important issues which were discussed during that time was situation in Berlin, questions of representation of People's Republic of China in the United States, Congo crisis, imperialism as a potential threat to world peace, apartheid, etc. Okay. Now India was represented by Jawaharlal Nehru. Then the second summit was held at Cairo, Egypt. Cairo summit held in 1974, and it was attended by 46 countries. Okay, first it was attended by 25 countries. So the first conference was attended by 25 countries, and second conference was attended by 46 countries. Okay, now Indian delegation during that time was led by Lal Bahadur Shastri. Okay, Lal Bahadur Shastri, and the important agendas or discussions of that conference was disarmament, pleaded for peaceful settlements of all international disputes, member government not to urged member governments not to recognize the white minority government in Rhodesia, and reiterated earlier stand of NAM against apartheid and colonialism. Apartheid and colonialism is is also said in the first conference also, and the demand for People's China in the United States was also reiterated. Okay, now next is about third summit is at Lusaka. Okay, in the Lusaka many important discussions were held, and it was attended by 52 countries. Okay, now what happens is that one of the discussion is the withdrawal of foreign forces from Vietnam, and boycott of Israel. Okay, boycott of Israel. Then stand against apartheid was being reiterated, and as a part of it, South African aircrafts were not allowed to fly through the air boundaries of or airbase of the NAM countries. Okay, and the Indian delegation was led by Indira Gandhi. Okay, now next summit was at Alger. Okay, Alger. Okay, next summit was at Alger 1973, and it was attended by 75 countries. And in 1976, the summit was at Colombo. Okay, Colombo. Okay, and during this time only new economic order was seen in UN General Assembly given a call for new international economic order. New international economic order, I can give you a brief summary. I will give you a detailed analysis about it later. New economic order is that during the time of 19th century, that is first half of 19th century, till that first half of 19th century, these third world countries or non-aligned countries were subjugated to colonizers or developed countries. Okay, they had supplied raw materials. They could only supply raw materials to the developed countries, and in developed countries there were far more developed technologies, and they could produce finished goods and products, etc. So what happened is that a huge disparity was there. So what happened is that these non-aligned countries had put forward alternative that these non-aligned or third world countries should be with par with the developed countries. Okay, they should not be subjugated under these developed countries. Such a kind of notion was there in the NAM. And at the very same time, in the early part, in the initial stages of UN General Assemblies, etc., many of the decisions were taken with the influence of the superpowers, either US or USSR. Okay, but what happened is that the NAM consisted of NAM. When NAM was formed, it emerged as a third body, and it was a majority body in UN General Assembly, and many of the policies of UN was influenced by this NAM. So it had a relevance. Okay, the relevance of today, relevance of NAM for today need to be discussed. Okay, but for now you need to understand about it. Okay. And during this time, okay, in this Colombo summit, what happened is that Indian Ocean was proposed as a zone for a zone of peace. Okay, zone of peace. Then the sixth summit was Havana summit. Okay, Havana summit, and in India during that time, a caretaker government was existing. Prime Minister Charan Singh. So he had sent his foreign minister to attend this summit at Havana. Okay, and the number of participants at this time rose to 92. Havana summit. I am saying about Havana summit, and Pakistan was admitted to the summit. But what happened is that Burma, a former member, left the NAM. Okay, the Cuban President Fidel Castro has said that USSR is a natural friend of NAM because the leaders of USSR is slightly tilted towards USSR or socialist ideas, but not entirely. Okay. Now, during this time in 1979, some of the Arab countries were having a differences between Egypt because by David Accord, the Egypt has reconciled with Israel. Okay, so what happened is that it was being opposed by several Arab countries, and these Arab countries proposed that Egypt should be kicked out from the NAM, but it didn't happen. So okay, the summit mainly discussed that proposal of abandoning the Egypt. Okay, throwing away the Egypt. Okay. Now, seventh summit was proposed to be held at Baghdad in 1982, but due to Iran-Iraq war, it could not happen. So what happened is that in New Delhi, the consecutive year 1983, seventh summit was held at New Delhi by 101 countries. Okay, 101 countries. Then the next is Harare Conference in 1986. Okay, Harare Conference in 1986, and in 1989 Belgrade Summit. Okay, 1989 Belgrade Summit. Belgrade Summit is very, very important because it is a summit before the disintegration of USSR and before the end of First World War, before the collapse of USSR. That is, it is the last summit of the bipolar world, NAM summit during the bipolar world or during the existence of bipolar world. After this summit, what happened is that 1991 USSR was disintegrated and USA emerged as the only superpower. Okay. Now, the 10th conference at Jakarta is considered, it is the first NAM conference. Okay, Jakarta conference was the first NAM conference after the end of Cold War. Okay, before the end of Cold War, which was the summit, Belgrade Summit, and it was also before the Yugoslavia. Okay, then another thing. Okay, this was the 10th conference. Okay, now next is about 11th NAM summit was held at Cartagena, Colombia in October 1995. Okay. India was represented by Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao. Then this summit was second after the end of the Cold War. Okay, end of the Cold War. Now, in this summit, in the Cartagena summit, the delegations of Pakistan had made NAM to evolve a system in which bilateral disputes can be settled by the movement. But this was a clever movement by Pakistan, because India seeks to resolve Kashmir issues through bilaterally, because without third party intervention. But Pakistan needed a third party intervention. Okay, so but it was a failure from that side. And during this summit, what happens is that a universal disarmament, okay, was being called by the members. A universal disarmament, that is, the mass destructive weapons need to be abandoned for the world peace. Such ban or such kinds of abandonment need to be universally executed. Such kinds of notions were there in the Cartagena summit among the members, among 13 members. And India at that time was reluctant to sign NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty. Non-Proliferation Treaty. Okay. Now, Non-Proliferation Treaty. Just give a just a hint of it. What do you mean by Non-Proliferation Treaty? Okay. In Non-Proliferation Treaty, what happens is that if a country signs a Non-Proliferation Treaty other than P5 members, okay, P5 members, permanent 5 members, that is US, UK, Russia, China, France, etc. So other than these countries, okay, if anybody signs this NPT treaty, okay, NPT treaty, what happens is that they can't produce nuclear, okay, any sort of nuclear, okay, either for fuel or for nuclear weapons. So India didn't agree to it. Why? Because if India wanted to agree to it, what happens is that all the countries need to need to sign this deal. That is, all countries need to abandon the production of nuclear weapon. So it was not possible. India could not possible. And another reason is that Pakistan also was not in favor of this NPT. South Korea was also not in favor of this treaty, and Israel also. So these are the 4 countries. These are the 4 countries, that is India, Pakistan, then North Korea, then Israel. These are the countries which didn't sign Non-Proliferation Treaty till now. Okay. Now recently 15th anniversary is being commemorated for Non-Proliferation Treaty. Now what happens is that in NAM, 11, that is 111 countries out of 113 countries have signed NPT. But what happened is that these countries took this concept called what? Universal disarmament to UN General Assembly. And this was a victory for India, because what happened is that universal disarmament is somewhat against the concept of Non-Proliferation Treaty, because what happens is that according to this, all the countries, including P5, need to stop the production of nuclear weapons. So this was a win for India, victory for India, or endorsement of India's concept of universal disarmament. Okay. Okay. So this is just a synopsis of evolution of NAM. So in the next part, we will see about the achievements of NAMs and the relevance of NAMs in the contemporary society. I hope you have enjoyed the video.